Major funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and M&T Bank, Geneva Burns, Massey and Webster, Capital One Bank, the Wickoff Group, New York Community Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from Aerial Property Advisors, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, CUNY TV Foundation, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Insurance Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Herrick Feinstein, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Massey Knakal Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, People's United Bank, RBS Citizens Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
I don't understand it, but the office market is hot as hell in New York. Everybody wants to be in different places in the office market. People want to have office space in Long Island City. They want to be in Brooklyn. They don't want to be in Staten Island yet, but they want to really own, operate, and it's really doing great. So today I've assembled 4 people who truly understand every aspect of the office market to tell us really what's happening. They include Scott Rechler, who is the chairman and CEO of RXR Realty. Michael Giglio, who is an operating principal, CFO, and director of investments for Kaufman Organization. Bob Knakal, chairman of Massey Knakal Realty Services and AKA the statistician. And last but not least, David Falk, who is the president of the New York Tri-State Region for Newmark Grubb Knight Frank. So, kid, you came back into New York a couple years, you sold your properties, you've been very active. Is there any bad market for the office market today?
Yes, there's a bad market for the office market, but I think it's more the building. I think when you look at the office market today, it starts with what the tenant wants, and the tenant has a very distinctive type of characteristics they want to see in the building. They want open space, they want air, they want to be in a specific type of neighborhood for the media and tech companies, and that's a big growing component. If you're talking about the asset management, private equity side, they went to high-end buildings. If you look in Manhattan, there's been 80 deals last year signed at over $100 a square foot. So it's really, I think, the building more than the submarket, and you have to have the right building with the right bones.
If we go back to the Starrett Lehigh, when Harry Hemsley and when people owned that, this was not a building that had anything.
Right.
You drove a truck up there and that was fine. Now you put a gym in.
Right.
You put outdoor space. So this is attracting a tenant, like David was mentioning. Under Armour went over there because of that situation.
It's interesting. We were talking before, when a broker goes on a space tour, it's not saying, I want to be near the Flatiron Building or on Park South. There's 4 days of tours over 6 weeks. 1 week, it's Lower Fifth. One is Meatpacking. One is Hudson Square. And one is find me a building that makes a statement that I'm looking for. Outdoor space, renovated lobby, high ceilings, big windows. It's about when you arrive, what does it say about the company?
Bobby, buyers, busy time, statistician, a lot of sales. What's happening in the office sales market?
The office sales market is on fire, and there's definitely a distinct trend towards larger transactions. In 12, about 110 office buildings sold in the city.
I knew the stats.
Have to do the stats, Mike. It dropped to 74 last year.
Cards, it's really good.
But The interesting thing was that the average sale in 2012 of an office building in the city was $95 million. Last year it was $200 million.
And what was the average price? Because it's going to
The average price last year was $952 a square foot, which was over a 20% increase from 2012 and much higher than the $883 it was in '07 at the peak of the last market.
My friend Mr. Rechler, prior to the show, before you arriving, was saying that what's your average price that you paid for the
So
building?
we've invested about $5.5 billion in the building since '09, and about $625 a foot. So I think, but to your point, you've seen them rise over time. Just a quick question for you, if you don't mind a follow-up. But did you see anything last year in terms of a point in the year where you saw that activity pick up? Because just when we looked at it, we saw sort of the end of the second quarter. It just seemed to be a uptick in demand in Manhattan.
But relating to that, that may have been, we discussed this, people wanted to buy for the tax, the tax situation the prior year, and the first quarter might have been slower. So that could have had.
Well, it was the sellers. There was a distinct slowdown in the first half of last year because many people who normally would have sold in the first half of 13 rushed to sell in 12 to take advantage of the lower capital gains rates. What we saw from a value perspective was that we had a tremendous run-up in land prices starting in January of last year, but the office market really started to take off in the second half of the year. And if you look at there were 10 transactions last year in the office sector that were over $500 million. There was only one in 2012, and most of those big transactions took place in the second half.
The roots of the Rechler family started in East New York for some warehouses going back. Scott has just made a statement. He's just gone into Vanderbilt Avenue, right near the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. So how do you decide? I mean, hey, I'm bullish on Brooklyn. I've been doing a number of shows. It's a great market. People want to be there. How do you decide that you felt Brooklyn was the right market, and also why Long Island City?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about before. You watch the tenant, right? When we've been watching the tenant back in '09 and '10, we saw this large demand for Midtown South. And now we talked earlier about Lower Manhattan. It's where the tenants want to be, where do their employees live, and also where's pricing. So you have this strange impact of what we call the push-pull. People are being pushed out of some of the markets in Manhattan because of pricing, and they're being pulled to some of these other hipper locations where you can get higher quality type office space that has that infrastructure and amenities that we talked about, and they want to be there at lower prices. And again, we look at this sort of, as we call it, sort of an emerging submarket. It's not something that tomorrow we're going to be able to say we're going to lease that at $50, $60 a foot, just like when we were in Midtown South, we weren't doing the same thing. But over the next 5 years, we think as those markets mature, they're going to be a mainstream part of the overall New York metro office market, where large companies are going to have outposts there. Some companies are going to be fully located there. Workforces are going to be there. And it becomes self-fulfilling, just as you saw again in Midtown South and Chelsea and all those areas, and the Meatpacking District. Once you have some of them there, more want to congregate around their peers, and same thing with Lower Manhattan.
It's like if we build it, we will come. Field's dream over there. Mikey, you guys at one time had and you still control a lot of properties in what we would call 7th Avenue, or at one time there was a garment center. You've done some acquisitions and you've repositioned some buildings. Tell us about that and what you're looking at today.
Well, interestingly enough, we have Kaufman organizations sort of divided into two groups, the core portfolio as well as the value-add portfolio. The value-add portfolio is something that we look at with institutional partners, and we engage ourselves in the process of finding buildings that have a significant opportunity if we were to put in significant capital, tenant work letters, and create this perception that you gentlemen are talking about, which is just begins with where does a tenant want to be and what does a tenant see itself in. And when we went to the end of 2012, it was with Bob Knakal's group, and we started looking at buildings. We looked at 24th Street, and it wasn't where we had 24th Street just
You needed a passport
west,
for that, right?
just west by Italy, just west of, what is it, Madison Square Park there. And, the price tag on the building was somewhere in the mid-$50 million range, and it was a 114,000 square foot building. And we had just been, we sort of brought 105th Avenue to fruition, which was another building that we'd bought down on 15th Street. And we saw a huge opportunity there, and then we ran out of space there when Apple and Yelp and Net-a-Porter gobbled up the space, and everybody wanted each other's space upon expiration. 100% leased. And we said, well, we need another play in this area. We really need to, continue to drive our business operations and create value and fill up a building. And we did just that at 24th Street. I don't know if 24th Street will have the opportunity that 105th Avenue had, because you've got an avenue building versus a side street building.
But you know what? David made a very interesting point prior to the show about Savannah and Twitter, which is a side street. Let's mention that.
Savannah purchased the building probably about 18 months ago. We sat down with them before they closed, and we said, what do tenants want? What is there that doesn't exist? And we surveyed the market, and we said, it's a building when you arrive, it sends a message. Outdoor space, high ceilings, branding. So we researched and said, if they go out looking for space, there's very few choices. Turns out that we ended up renovating the building where it had a distinct look. We had a broker event. Every broker said, I can't believe it. I'm shocked. This is the building I used to go to. And when we ultimately made the Twitter deal, we had a lot of other parties interested, but it was the right deal for them.
I think a great example is what Scott did at 1350 Avenue of the Americas. I passed it maybe
1330.
1330. I couldn't believe how the building looks. Right. The entranceway and the storage. I mean, because it was that ugly.
You know what's
facade.
interesting?
I mean,
you have Noel there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was walking to the building the other day. Noel was at 111 8th. And I remember they were looking for space. We said, oh, they're going to be Midtown South.
Exactly.
This is what's happening.
Noel's
of
that's
the world
exactly what the shock
is going
to
Noel
over there.
A steel and glass building. They're a hip tenant. Their space looks modern, contemporary, and hip. And that's what we're starting to see. Midtown buildings being reinvented for tenants that we thought only could be in Midtown South. They can create a very cool image.
And by the way,
of that
just
building.
to that point, I mean, we made a point to bring Noel there because we thought that would also change
Looks
the
great.
image of the building, right? So it's the combination. I'll just say, just two things that we're working on though that fit that right now that I'll encourage people to go see is we're transforming 237 Park, which is a building that's been asleep on Park Avenue for
Sleep
a
is the
decade.
understatement, yes.
That I think people are going to be shocked when they see the ultimate transformation of that. And same with 75 Rock, two great locations, but are buildings that have been very much neglected, that we're taking through hundreds of millions of dollars of redevelopment. And a year from now, I think would look very different.
Just out of curiosity, what's the tenant, what's the audience that you're trying to target for that? Because Midtown, that's the decision you have to make. Who's my target audience?
So the 237 Park, we look at it as sort of plays two layers. One, it's the low-cost provider of high-quality space for someone that wants a Park Avenue address, and also for tenants that are in media and tech that want 60,000 square foot floor plates, a lot of light. We're redoing the whole lobby, a lot of amenity space in the mix next door to Grand Central, so you can have a reasonably priced, efficient floor plate for media and tech.
Neglect is an opportunity for value add. It's a big opportunity.
Well said.
Now, with regard to neglect and value add, there is, the discussion of Long Island City. I mean, looking in some of my roles,
Of
with
the previous
with
owner,
New York,
I'm sorry.
Okay, of New York Community Bank, there are so many new residential developments taking place. I mean, all of the properties, many of my friends in the banking area said, I got a loan on Queens Plaza, or I got a loan over here. There are 37 hotels in Long Island City. How do you see, have our buildings trading for office in Long Island City, Bobby, or are you seeing more on conversions of residential? And then I'm going to ask Scott the same.
Well, I think if you had your choice, because residential rents more easily and at higher rents than commercial, if you were going to repurpose an old building, you probably would repurpose it for residential if the floor plates were efficient
You know what?
enough.
I may disagree with you, because when you're in office, you don't the loss factor, the tape measure. When you're taking an industrial building over there and you're converting it to residential, you lose a lot of space. So the loss factor may be greater.
Yeah, I think Bob's right, though. In general, anything that can be residential versus office, the economics work better for residential.
Yeah, you
Which,
have
by
to
the
look building to building, because
agree.
a lot of different factors will impact that decision.
And by the way, that's good. When you look at the office market, when people talk about New York long term, that's one of the factors that give me great confidence, is that supply is not only constrained by the amount of available land, but it's also supply is constrained by the fact that there's such strong residential demand. There's 14, the lowest amount of supply of residential in 14 years in the marketplace right now. So people are eating up and gobbling up residential and squeezing out office.
Right, and some of the office, in Lower Manhattan, if you take 80 Pine, you take other conversions on William Street, all the other things, they're being converted to residential, and they're also being converted to hospitality over there in this situation. Lower Manhattan, we have seen so many leases, you know, besides the trade center and everything. Why are tenants going that far in Manhattan?
Mid-1980s, there was a $25 delta between Midtown, Midtown South. All the publishing and advertising went down there. They created nightlife, 24/7 pedestrian traffic. So now tenants that are looking to do deals in Midtown South, $65 rents, $70 rents, whatever it is. Most tenants can't afford it. Downtown, you could save $25 a foot in some cases. And now we're seeing a lot of people looking. I really believe 18 months from now, it's going to feel entirely differently. I was recently at Brookfield Place. They're creating a whole food concept. Food, Chelsea Market. We were involved with Chelsea Market since January 2000. That creates a community. Food, these tenants work late. It has fun. It's a great component.
One of the best things that happened with Brookfield Place, I went down there, is the fact that you don't have to go above the bridge anymore. You know, you can walk underneath.
Correct.
And
Connector.
the
East-West
connector
connector.
and the space and what's going to be there with the retail and everything.
I think the interesting with Lower Manhattan is it's the value proposition now, but I think 24, 36 months from now, it's not going to be the value proposition anymore for office, because I think it's going to stand alone uniquely as a central business district that's going to have a level of tenant demand, commercial demand globally. Let's say I want to be down in Lower
So you
Manhattan.
strike now, you're saying.
I'm saying now's a window where you can buy it cheap, but I think that market's going to
You
come
don't
to a
believe
different
it's
level.
still going to be a lower rent?
You know, it depends on what building you're talking about, but I think Lower Manhattan will be a central business district that will be one of the top global central businesses as a standalone. And it's different than it used to be. I mean, there's 12 million tourists that were down there last year. You're going to have the Memorial Museum open. As you said, Brookfield Place, Westfield, and then Fulton Street.
And
I
then
mean,
you're going to
it's
have the
just-
Howard Hughes situation on the seaport. You have
Right,
all of
it's
it?
a 24/7 city. It's not the 9 to 5, you know, come in and leave like our parents and grandparents.
And Michael, rising rents downtown are going to push a spillover effect into Long Island City and into Brooklyn.
Exactly.
And so you're going to see a very, very dynamic market.
You know, when we talk about Brooklyn, you know, we were talking briefly, you know, Kushner and Invesco bought the buildings from Jehovah's Witness, and they call it Dumbo Heights. And, you know, there are now you're in Vanderbilt over there. What's your thoughts about Metrotech? Because I remember Metrotech, it was still the low cost of alternative. You were able to get space 2 years ago, Metrotech, for $25 a foot.
From our experience in Brooklyn, people looking and curious about it, I think that with the explosion of tech, it's not from Metrotech. I think it's more of, if you created something in Williamsburg, you created it in Dumbo, you create the hip factor they want, I think it will work. Metrotech I haven't seen because it's a little more banking,
institutional,
back
it's financial
office.
bank.
Right.
But JP Morgan said they're moving, you know, I forget what the number was, 2,000 people or something in Brooklyn. So,
To Brooklyn?
yeah, to Metrotech, actually. Their
Interesting.
space in Metrotech.
JP Morgan's one of the biggest buyers right now, aren't they?
Right.
Their asset management.
Their
group,
asset
so-
management.
Right.
a piece of
They're-
that. Bobby, so who's buying besides these gentlemen? Where are these people coming? Are you getting,
Well,
are you taking your Berlitz course to learn different languages?
Just about. I think it's a very interesting market, and I think for office buyers, you have to look at the office building sector of 100,000 feet and under, and then over 100,000 feet. Because under 100,000 feet, you have high net worth individuals, you have families, you have foreign buyers who are individuals. Above 100,000 feet, you almost have to have an institutional component because the numbers are just so big. We're approaching $1,000 a foot, so a 100,000 foot building is $100 million.
So here's my question: 450 Park, great building, okay, highest price ever of a sale. I mean, who did you look at it? I mean, who could afford to pay that, and what kind of
Well,
rent?
first of all, you got to remember one thing, and that's driving some of the prices per foot is the retail side. You know, and you know,
I
one
agree,
thing,
but-
and at 450 Park, the sale, and again, we're not enough in that business to tell you this is right or wrong, was that there's an opportunity with the retail, and as you know, the trade
432,
right, is open, that there's going to be this enhancement to it, and that drove a lot of that value. If you take that retail out of the equation, you know, you're let's call it that $1,000 a foot for the office space. I'm not saying it's cheap, but I think it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
Yeah, Michael, you look at how these foreign buyers are looking at the market. A lot of them are responding to a global macroeconomic uncertainty that's going on. And I think most foreign investors are looking much more at asset preservation than they are at yield. They're saying, if I'm going to invest $100 million of equity into an office building in Manhattan, I have a pretty good feeling that when I want my $100 million back, I'll be able to get it back. And so the yield is less important than the asset preservation quality of the investment.
You know, just give you an interesting stat just on the point of the market. So last year we underwrote 56 different deals, $25 billion worth of transactions. So underwrote, fully underwrote, took through, building tours, the whole works. We did one deal, 237 Park, at the beginning of the year, February. We signed that deal for $800 million. Of the $25 billion, 45% of it never traded. So it still flowed into the next level. But it just shows you, and that $25 billion was twice as much as we looked at the year
Here's the
before.
interesting thing. You said never traded.
It doesn't mean it won't trade this year.
That's,
I just
thank
said
you.
it just got pushed. It didn't trade last year. So, I mean, I'm a believer that you're going to see activity this year, and I think, Bob, I think you've said this in things I read, is going to be at a higher level than even what last year was. I think because of what didn't trade and because of what people are seeing pricing and the amount of liquidity flowing to the marketplace, it's going to be more sellers to the market, and there's a lot of active buyers.
Yeah, well, you look at 2012, there's only about $10.5 billion of office transactions. It was $14.5 billion last year, and we're expecting that to be over $20 billion this year.
Hudson Yards, what's happening?
Obviously, the appeal is large and it's brand new. Stating the obvious, but that's where you can get it if you want to be in Midtown. They've done Time Warner, SAP, L'Oreal, Coach, so that's happened, and now you have a lot of other sites. You have what was the Moynihan site. You have a number of sites that can be created there. I guess the first building's finished in 2015. They're going to have the top of the house, 300,000 square feet. The question is, what's the rent going to be? I think they're asking around 90. I'm not sure.
Which one?
The first one, which is related. Yeah, I forgot the address because no one knows the address.
nobody
Everyone
knows.
calls it Hudson Yards. You know what we're finding is New York. The good thing is people are tired of some of the buildings have the large convectors. They go to other cities. It's just glass. It feels modern and contemporary. That's what the new construction offers. So it's exciting, and the 7 line opening up is a good thing.
Here's a question, and you have properties in New Jersey. New Jersey, with a grow credits, and with the urban tax credits, certain tenants or people can get really big incentives. New York City temporarily stopped the REAP benefits from moving. There's a question of the lower Manhattan credits coming back. Do you see the danger of our, as one would say, the poaching from New Jersey to New York?
Listen, I think there's a risk to it. I mean, the number could be anywhere from $50 to $70 a square foot in terms of what the incentive could be for.
And you can sell the incentive. You can sell the credit.
I'm unaware of that, but it's a big number. But I still think, there's a fundamental psychological decision to say, I'm moving this operation to New Jersey or I'm moving to New Jersey. I think tenants are very focused on New York. And the one thing I want to just, follow something that David talked about, which is new construction. And it also goes to some old construction. And it's a big factor also in pricing, which is densification. One of the things that we've seen, and it was a big factor in 13, was we went from this 250 square feet per employee down to 125 and 150 in certain cases. And so new construction that is very efficient enables a tenant to pay a higher price per foot, but a lower price
Right, the
per
consolidation
employee.
is spacing.
We did the first deal, 51 Astor, with a tech firm. Rents are higher per square foot than any building we showed them. We made a deal there. Why? They were intelligent. They analyzed how many bodies they could fit in the floor plate, and I was really impressed and happy to see it, because for so many times tenants just say what the per square foot price is, for the rentable.
Right, but
this is bodies.
But you have to look at the bodies. Now, do you see that when you bought 105th and
We saw a consolidation of the space required per each employee, where people were trying to squeeze things in, make things more ergonomic, and each employee got less of
let's
amount
look
of
at the
square
law
footage.
firms. The law firms today, you don't have law libraries, the conference rooms, the secretarial spaces are reduced in all the situation.
There are so many moving parts in this business, and I say this because I'm responsible on my end for having to underwrite the deal and then having to live up to the underwriting and then have to live up to the expectations of everybody who's involved with
Including the investors,
the
right?
equity side, right, which is the worst part for me this time of year. I'm surprised I'm even sitting here. But to be honest, you really have to be able to deliver on your end product what your vision was. And there are so many moving parts, like Bob says, the national economy, the global economy. People are parking cash here just for the purpose of being able to preserve the asset. it's almost like you walk the street and you can get a feel of the economic condition locally as well as globally just by walking down some of these Manhattan streets,
okay.
looking at what's going on in terms of retail spaces.
So we have, if we're looking at different neighborhoods, we never had a Hudson Yards, and we have a resurgence really of Lower Manhattan. Do you see a lot of companies eventually moving, because you have other buildings in the Hudson Yards neighborhood, some that Bobby's selling properties over there, for residential or for office conversion. Do you see Hudson Yards truly become, as Ross has said, maybe the Rockefeller Center of the 21st century?
I think, listen, I don't know if it's going to be the Rockefeller Center 21st century, but I think it will be another sub-market within Midtown that's equal to sort of Midtown. And I think, we see it with Starrett Lehigh. We're benefiting from what they're doing at Hudson Yards. We're adjacent to what Hudson Yards is.
Right.
We have tenants that they're looking at, that are looking at their bigger space to say, we'll take 100 or 200,000 feet here, and they're paying 80 over there, and they'll pay 60 to us, right? So
the reason why it's interesting, why they're calling you, people want large floor plates. They want densification. There really are only 12 buildings from 34th Street to Soho that have floor plates of over 50,000 feet. So where do you go? They're all, and those buildings are all 111 8 Chelsea Market, Starrett. You can't rent space.
111, you can't go to.
So what they're going to do, I think, they're going to start looking at buildings in Midtown that have larger floor plates, and they're going to say, within my four walls, I'm going to create my look. Because if you go out of Manhattan and you go to Seattle or Silicon Valley, these are not necessarily converted lofts. These are office buildings.
But I think what Scott did, he bought 620 Avenue of the Americas. These people didn't put any money in it. So the idea is, that's exactly what you're saying. If a landlord really has the ideas to take care of it, you're going to be able to do it. It's not only that.
I think that's where, and to follow the point, the business has gotten to right now where you need to be more ahead of the curve, and as an advisor, you need to be able to prep your client as to what are you really focused on, what are you looking at, like you made the point before where Twitter was looking. Same with us at 620. You need to say, what's the vision of the tenant? What does the end user ultimately want? We talk about densification. You need more bathrooms. You need more elevators. If you need to be able to accommodate what the people need.
You know what? Like you said before on Starrett Lehigh, you need a gym. You need certain more amenities.
Right.
Or people want to have the capability of, if they're working late, they want to have that gym. They want to have certain restaurants over there. They want to have more.
We
David,
started
to your
putting
point-
couches in lobbies. Now think about that. We did a couch for Jamestown Rockwood at 530 Fifth Avenue. We redid the lobby, put in hip couches and a coffee bar. Why? We're trying to attract a crowd that wasn't necessarily Grand Central attorneys and accountants, but people looking. That's why I asked you about 237, because you are going to, and you will successfully create people's views of that building.
That's right.
And no, it's okay. If you want large floor plates, the yards is where you can get them. The floor plates there can be enormous.
Whatever you want.
And I think the demand for space in the yards is gaining so much traction that we're selling land over there now, where we're selling a fairly decent-sized site every month, and every month there's a new pricing record set, because people are so bullish about what's going to happen over there. So I agree with Steve. I think that the Hudson Yards development and the broader area is going to become, 20 years from now, it'll be the place to be in the city.
There is no way that I can have the four of you here for 27 minutes. So I promise before the end of the season to have you all back so we can continue this conversation and see what happens like in 2 or 3 months. So I'd like to thank Scott Rechler, Michael Giglio, Bob Knakal, a.k.a. The Statistician, and David Falk, and I'll see you next week.